Hi, I'm David Phillips, one of four volunteer vergers at Christ and St. Luke's Church in Norfolk, Virginia, and I want to welcome you to the annual conference of the Vergers Guild of the Episcopal Church on October 22 through 25. On Thursday evening, October 22nd, you will attend Evensong, led by our choir and clergy, with the homily delivered by the Right Reverend Susan B. Haynes, Bishop of the Diocese of Southern Virginia. On Friday evening, October 23rd, you will have the opportunity to go to the movies right in our nave and see the great silent film, The Phantom of the Opera, with an improvised score created and played by Dorothy Papadakos, former organist at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City. Recently, I had the opportunity to virtually visit with Dorothy, she in Wilmington, North Carolina, and me in Norfolk. Here's that conversation. Hi, Dorothy. How are you doing?
Hey, David. Hi. How are you? Happy Easter.
Thank you. Thank you. And just saying back at you.
Thank you. And Greek Easter was yesterday, so I got double this year. It's great. Whoopa.
Whoop-a. You've been performing at Christ and St. Luke's for the last 5 years, beginning
Mhm.
with a performance of The Phantom of the Opera in 2021. That was followed by Nosferatu in 2022, The Hunchback of Notre Dame in 2023, The
Mhm.
Lodger in 2024, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde last year. Now you're coming back in 2026 with a reprise of The Phantom of the Opera. And that's
Yes. Yes.
all right. That's perfectly fitting for our community
I'll
because
say.
school and college generation will have cycled through. And with the
Mhm.
very transient military presence we have in Hampton Roads, there are a lot of folks that will not have had that experience of the Phantom of the Opera. I've got to say that even though I've seen all of these, I'm looking forward
Oh,
to this next
thank
one.
you. Oh, thank you.
First
I
of
love
all,
playing there. Oh, go ahead.
tell me a bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? And what inspired you to get interested in playing the organ?
Uh, it was kind of a fluke, but there are no accidents. I grew up in St. James, Long Island, New York, and Reno, Nevada. My parents split up when I was young, and so I was a bi-coastal baby and had these two different childhoods going on at the same time. And when I was in Reno, I started piano lessons at the age of 8 with Mr. McNabb, this hefty Scotsman with a goatee who played the nightclubs in Reno. And here he was trying to teach me Mozart, Beethoven, Grieg. I remember the Grieg so much, and the Chopin. And I'm like, at the end of each lesson, he'd sit down and play Duke Ellington, Gershwin, Rodgers and Hammerstein. So I went on strike. I was around 10 years old. I went on strike, David, and I said, I'm not practicing anymore until you teach me your music. And he goes to my mother and said, Your kid's impossible. And she said, Well, give her whatever she wants. It'll if it keeps her playing and practicing. So I was so lucky. Here I was 10 years old, and he taught me jazz.
Oh,
He taught me how
wow.
to read lead sheets, how to improvise chords, and then how to read classical music as harmonic progressions. The greatest gift ever, because I look at Chopin and Beethoven as fat and Bach, of course, fabulous chord progressions, and just makes it easier in my brain to sort all that out and play them. And so I started at Trinity Episcopal, now it's the Cathedral in Reno, on a three-manual Allen organ. And when Mr. McNabb died, I was so lost. I was only 16 years old. My hero was Liberace, who I'd gotten to meet. We'd go to see his show every October at my birthday. He really was my guru, my hero, my everything. And when Mr. McNabb died, I was just sitting in church one Sunday and all of a sudden heard the mighty Allen organ going, David. And I'm like, wow, orchestra in a box. This is cool. And so the organist there took me on for lessons. And I'll never forget the first thing he taught me was the Bach Toccata in D minor.
Oh, wow.
Now, what kid wouldn't turn onto the organ after that, right? I was
Right.
like, this is great.
So,
And that's how the rest is history. Because I got my gig at St. John the Divine when Paul Halley heard me improvise. And he said, I need somebody here who can read samba charts. Those are his
oh,
exact words.
wow. How
Yes.
how did you get started doing improvised scores for silent films? I mean, what was the impetus for that?
Yes, so that was at St. John the Divine. And when I was just a pup, I started out as the night watch organist, and then Paul made me his organ scholar. And that was in 86, I think. And Lee Irwin, the great silent movie organist, was performing there every August. He'd have a silent film festival. And I would sit there like a puppy at his feet in the organ loft, watching this man play to these movies. And he was not only playing the great organ, it had four manuals, he was also playing a Roland synth over here, fed through the cathedral sound system. And I would just marveled at had it. He just watched this movie and played to these actors. And one year, I think it was 90, it was right after I was appointed cathedral organist. I got a phone call. This was for Halloween, 3 days before Halloween. And she said to me, Dorothy, Lee fell. He was 94 years old at this point, and he
Wow.
hit his head and he can't play the show. And it's Phantom of the Opera. And I said, not kidding. I said, oh, you don't understand. I'm a liturgical improviser. I don't know how to play a silent movie. She said, you're on, kid. You're all we've got. And she said, call Lee. I don't know what to tell you. So I called Lee and I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? And he said, tell you what, just these were the days of the beta. Remember those videos? Beta,
Yes,
VHS, and
absolutely.
yeah. And he said, watch it. I could rent the movie. In those days, we were still screening the films on the old time movie machines, 35 millimeter.
Oh my.
And many times the film broke in my shows at St. John the Divine because we were using the old things. But Lee said, watch the video and write themes, your own melodies. Don't write anything that sounds like anyone else. Don't use any generic material. Don't no pre-existing music. You just be Dorothy. And then you improvise off those themes whenever the character comes back, and then twist it around according to what's going on in the scene. And he said, just stay with the movie. I'm like, what's that even mean? Stay with the movie. And so, oh my God, it was one of the greatest nights of my life. 3 nights later, we would do two silent movies the Friday night before Halloween there, and we would have 1,600 people at each show. And then,
Goodness.
yeah, Ralph Lee, who founded the Greenwich Village Halloween Parade, would then do a parade of ghouls down the aisle, and I would improvise to the theme from the Munsters, the Addams Family, the Alfred Hitchcock Danse Macabre, all those great old tunes.
Wow.
So there I was in the first show, a 7 o'clock show, and I literally, it's one of the few times in my life and a career, I was shaking. I was so scared. I was shaking. And even though you think, well, it's improvisation, there are no wrong notes, I was still terrified. And I was 20 minutes into the movie, and I'll never forget, I was on the top manual, I was on the French horn and the trumpet harmonique, and all of a sudden, it's like everything just opened up. And the next thing I knew, the movie was over. And I'm like, wow. And the performance went great. And I thought, this is cool. And I then quickly discovered, staying with the movie means you leave yourself and you go to this other level of just being transported with the actors, the story. And then some years later, I was reading, my hero is Charlie Chaplin, and I was reading his brilliant autobiography called My Biography. And he says in it, he says, the big mistake musicians make when they're accompanying my films is they all try to be funny. He said, I'm the one who's funny. He said, the musician's job is to supply the emotional subtext of the scene. And he said, then
I
it
get
gets
it.
funny. Yeah. Because he said,
Sure.
then there's a counterpoint in energy. And he said, then what I do is really funny because you're like, say it's a love scene. I'm playing this music. He's loving the girl, but he's falling over his feet, you know?
Right.
So I absolutely, after that night, David, fell in love with this. And I thought, what a great way for me to channel my improvisation ability beyond liturgical improv. And so I stopped doing organ recitals. And just when people wanted to book me, I said, well, how about a silent movie? It's just exploded. It's exploded.
Okay. Okay.
That's
So,
how it happened.
can you explain a bit about the process you go through when you create a
Mm.
score and explain what you mean by improvise?
Hmm.
I should think that with the number of performances you do, there must be some aspects of the score
Hmm.
that are repeated.
Yes, yes. Well, actually, I'm in rehearsals right now for a Charlie Chaplin show at the Citadel. Isn't that cool? They have a
Ah,
great big organ in Summerall Chapel down in Charleston. So I brought today one of my scores. I'm doing the three last films from his mutual films, and this is The Immigrant. And I'm doing The Cure, The Immigrant, and The Adventurer, three short films on one program. Each film's around 23 to 28 minutes. It makes a great show. And so this Lee Irwin taught me how to write a cue sheet. So you can see up close, it's just a lead sheet. It's notes with chords, you know? Let's see.
if you say so.
Oh, it is. Here, let me find something. Here's, okay, here's the love music for Edna. And so you have a melody. Now, you use a cue sheet because I play so many films on so many organs. You have to have something to remember what pistons to push and what keyboard to go to, because otherwise it's hard to remember, at least for me. And so what stays the same show to show is my basic themes. Like Lee said, you have your theme for each character, and then you improvise around that theme, major, minor. If it's in three, play it in four or something else. If it's up here in the high notes, you play it in the pedal. I mean, changing textures, tempo, keys, modalities. And where things get really fun is the organ and the room dictate everything, including the audience, too. That's the third factor, the audience, about
Sure.
how I play the piece is different every time because no two organs are the same. No two rooms are the same, and every audience is different. I remember once I had a Phantom of the Opera at Groton School, the
Hmm.
private school. And it was an audience of teenagers, right? Now, I played Phantom many times by then, so I was used to all the spots where the audience cracks up because it's kind of campy and funny.
Hmm.
And in those moments at the Groton with these teenagers, it was dead silent. The teen angst seriousness was there. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And it was so, I had to instantly shift how I treated this film for that audience because they were going someplace very different. They were still innocent and saw the Phantom as a really tragic figure who's the outsider, who's
Right.
being
Right.
ostracized, and he's being denied love. And what happens to someone when they're denied love and they're kept out of the group? They get angry and they take revenge. And
Right.
these teenagers got it like that. And many audiences that I play this for, they're laughing through and kind of miss the whole seriousness of what this movie's about.
Yeah.
So that's a big impact on changing the score. And then you have like a room like St. John the Divine, which has 9 seconds of echo. So I can really play with the room in terms of silence, because to me, silence in a score is as evocative and powerful as the crashing chords, those echoes where sound just decays. And I can do a lot of that in Christ and St. Luke's It's a very nice room. So
Oh, that's
that affects it too. And then there's dry rooms where you just feel like you're holding on to the organ for dear life.
wonderful.
You know? So
Well,
that's why I do it because it's different every time.
yeah, and you just anticipated what I was going to ask next is how does the architecture of a particular space
Hmm.
affect the performance? Is it
Yeah.
materially different each time? And
Yes.
you said yes. So,
Oh, yes. And a couple of years ago, I played, I think it was Phantom again. It's the most popular film. It was at Virginia Theological Seminary, and I was one of their dedicatory organists during their dedication year of the new Booty Taylor organ in the new chapel because they had a fire in the chapel
right.
burned down. And have you been in there? There's
I have not.
screens. Oh, there's four screens on four walls. So
Wow.
wherever you're sitting in this circular chapel, they could see the film because that's how they do their liturgy is beam it onto the wall. And so that was really interesting too, playing just with the phantom all around me. And I don't know how to describe it. The audience was right, literally just a few feet away from me. So it was very intimate and which I love, just having the people right there. I mean, I can often hear the laughter and I have some audiences who really get into it who do the old fashions like Rocky Horror Show, making the sounds, for the bad guy and the
Mhm.
damsel. But to actually hear people's reactions that close also affects how I play because then I feel like I can go deeper with it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Take the emotional or slow down or I don't know how to describe it, but it's more intimate as opposed to me being an organist in a distant loft and the congregation's downstairs 80,
Right.
100 feet away.
Yeah. Related to the difference in spaces and audiences and all that sort of thing, where would you be just before and just after Christ in St. Luke's in this tour?
I know where I'm going right after. I fly from Norfolk to Kansas City for Kansas City Symphony. And that show this year is Jekyll and Hyde. And I think it's my ninth year at Kansas City Symphony.
Wow.
And that show, every year since I started there 9 years ago with Nosferatu, sells out 1,300 people. Kansas City loves their horror movies. And then from Kansas City, I go to Grace Cathedral. And this is my 19th year at Grace
Oh my
Cathedral in
goodness.
San Francisco Jazz. Yeah, we're coming up on our big 20. Grace Cathedral is where I've launched many of my premieres of my new scores. And one of those was the Battleship Potemkin.
Wow.
You know? Yeah. And of course, Charlie Chaplin. And the horror films, no matter how many times you do them in San Francisco, that is a Halloween town.
Big
And
time. Yeah.
yes, and many years we
Yeah.
do double features. So it's great. So tours just coming together now. I'm sorry I don't have it off the top of my head.
Um, Changing subjects
Hmm.
entirely. When you were here last year, you and I had a conversation about your experiences with Vergers at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine.
Hmm.
Can you share with our Verger audience something about that?
Well, they're the pillars of the cathedral. I can tell you that. They, of course, with the altar guild and the organist, we're the first ones in before a service, right?
Mhm.
We're the first ones in getting it all set up. I work in theater, so I tend to think of our liturgies as the theatrical productions, right? You've got music, lyrics, costumes, lighting, staging. It's a big production. And St. John the Divine, those productions are massive,
Yeah.
just massive.
Yes.
And so our verger, when I was there, was David Pelletier. Maybe some of our vergers might remember him. God, was he a hoot. He had just the most wicked, funny sense of humor. He told the best jokes. They were off color and just and witty. He was a punster too. And so I just have fond memories of he would crack the pressure of these big things. It would just get more down to earth because he made me comfortable. I always knew where things were. I knew where things were happening. I would take the program to him before the service and say, okay, where's the travel music? Where's the stop? Who's doing what? You know what I mean?
Sure.
And vamp till ready. Really, that was in my notes. Vamp till ready, cuts are all of those cues. So he was my traffic coordinator, and um, also he would often throw me cues. So during the actual service, how many times do we do weddings and there's no bride? She's late, And so he'd be the one throwing me cues and funerals. Um, and I remember the Order of St. John of Jerusalem always had a big annual event at St. John the Divine. And they would all come down that nave, that 600-foot nave, center aisle, and with those massive black capes. You know who I mean? It was almost like March of the Stormtroopers. I always joke with David, I want to play that music sometime with them all coming in. I mean, there's this legion with these big black capes flowing. Um, and he was the director of all that traffic of who sits where and then walking people up to the pulpit at the right time. So my memories of him are all about making it go flawlessly. And he did. He just was so precise and good about the elegance, the elegant bearing, how he trained his other vergers,
Right.
and the elegance and sincerity with which they carried out, performed their duties. Um, and I had never even known what a verger was till I got to St. John the Divine. And so I always joke that he was on the verge, of course, of brilliance, verge
Well,
of brilliance.
you have such a breadth of experiences and interests. I'd like to know more about your life, say, with the Paul Winter Consort.
Paul, yes. That's one of the greatest joys of my time at St. John the Divine. Um, I started there in 1990 doing night watch, which is when teenagers from across the country come for a overnight sleep in the crypt, and they would bring them up at midnight to walk through the cathedral in the dark for a midnight mass with guitar at the high altar. How cool is that? And so I would play the organ to get them in. I'd play the state trumpets with them standing underneath it. Oh, it was so loud. And then I would play fun stuff that they would know, like Star Wars and stuff, get them down the aisle. They would sit in the great choir for a little bit, and then I'd do a demo of the organ. And one year after Night Watch, I was, I think I was assistant organist at this point, and I was just getting my music ready for Sunday morning. And it was after a Paul Winter show, they were striking the stage. And so I started noodling on some anthem, and there appears Paul Winter in the organ loft. He said, "Oh, I thought it was Paul Halley playing. Who are you?" I'm like, "Oh my God, it's Paul Winter." I was so starstruck. And long story short, Paul Halley he was playing the organ at that point, and then he'd run downstairs, play the piano back and forth, back and forth. And then he said, "Dorothy, would you like to play the organ when I'm playing the piano?" And I'm like, oh my God. Because he said, "You can read samba charts, you can read any chart." And so that's how that relationship started, that I got to join the Paul Winter Consort. And my first official gig with them was at Princeton University Chapel on the old organ. Half of it wasn't playing, but it was still this big four-manual monster. And it was in a blizzard. It was in January of 1984.
Wow.
God, that's like 40 years ago. Woo! That's a long time. And it was just one of the greatest thrills. And so I've been playing with them ever since. And then I got to tour in Japan and Singapore, playing with Paul and the
Wow.
consort.
It's called being
And
in the right place at the right time.
yes, with the right skills,
Yep.
and I feel like I musically flowered. Paul Halley and Paul Winter, what mentors they were to me. Because, would you want to hear a funny story? When I was the organ scholar under Paul, he had begun giving me improvisation lessons, and he never once charged me one penny for an improv lesson. Can you believe that? Isn't that something?
Wow.
And after we'd been doing that maybe a couple of years, he said, I'd like you to be my organ scholar. And after I did that for a time, he said to me, this was summer of 87. He said, Dorothy, I really like you to come on the team as the assistant organist. And I'm like, and I was working now at a jingle house. This is 1987.
Wow.
This when synthesizers were getting really big and they were sampling sounds. I was working in the studio of Suzanne Ciani where they would sample the opening of a Coke can and put that in a commercial, or the snap of a potato chip. So this was a big deal, sampling sounds, putting it on a keyboard, and then putting it into music and commercials. I said, oh, Paul, no, thank you. I like the organ and I like the cathedral, but I want to work in commercials. Can you imagine the hubris of youth? And he said, okay, well, you might get sick and tired of that someday. I don't know. But he said, I'm going to be on vacation the month of August. Would you mind filling in for me? And then maybe we can just revisit this when I come back from holiday. And so I played the month of August at St. John the Divine. And when he came back, he said, well, have you given any thought to my, offer? Would you be interested in being the assistant organist at St. John the Divine? I'm like, yes, yes, very much.
Wow.
So I'm glad he could see through the hubris of youth, right?
Sure.
I,
For
I
sure.
was, and I'm ever grateful to Paul Halley. My gosh,
Sure.
yeah, and Paul Winter. They're very, very dear friends.
One last thing I want to talk
Yeah.
about, and we don't have a whole lot of time, but I understand you've just completed a new play.
Yes.
Aside being an organist, you're a
Yes.
playwright. So
Yes.
tell
Yes.
us about that.
Well, it's still a little under wraps because I've literally just finished it days ago and just sent it to my director and my lawyer. So I'm going to wait to talk about that until
Okay.
after. But it's called Creatrix. It's got a great title, Creatrix. I love it. And it's fun and funny. And a lot of it includes my journey as a musician. So I'm really stoked. It's the true story of my outrageous parents. I can say that, and their
Okay.
circle. And because my dad was um, an inventor, he invented the first coaxial drone helicopter.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And then my mom was a beauty queen and Hollywood starlet.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, you can imagine this. It was a wild childhood. So uh, that's Creatrix, and but the other
Well,
big project is Divine Wine, my musical about wine. So we're hoping to get producers for both of them.
oh wonderful.
Yes.
Well, listen, this has been just great, and we can't
Oh.
wait till October the 23rd at 7:30
Mhm.
in the evening at Christ and St. Luke's in Norfolk,
Yes.
Virginia.
The Phantom and me.
You
Yeah.
take care.
You too, David. Can't wait to see all of you Vergers in Norfolk.
All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.